And thanks everyone for joining today. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Friday. Our topic today is really on portfolio management, and it's one aspect I want to talk about, and then I'm going to get to some more aspects later, more structural enterprise issues that often come up when folks are trying to do agile at scale and trying to do multiple projects at the same time. It's a fascinating topic. It comes up all the time, and so I wanted to let everyone out there know of some of the patterns that we're seeing out in industry. Let's do a little bit of introduction right quick. A little bit of meet and greet. Mostly I'm going to be talking about what I'll call bad behaviors. And bad behaviors, it means that I'm going to try and bring in actual real conversations from actual client situations so that you can kind of see and hear how these things sort of transpire out in our consulting work with industry. And then talk about some tools and some ideas or ways about thinking about some of these problems. And I've got a few bad behaviors that I want to discuss. A little bit about me, right quick. The name is Roland Cuellar. I've been doing Agile now for about 14 or 15 years. It's the only thing that I've done in all of that time. I have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. I used to be a software developer for IBM and other companies a long time ago. Got my MBA at UCLA years ago, which was a fantastic experience. I love that. And then as far as Lightspeed goes, we only do Agile consulting. We've been doing it a long time. That's all we do. We have a bunch of really marquee clients, folks like Capital One and Nationwide and CNBC, and doing a lot of work in the federal government lately. And so we have a lot of experience to bring to this discussion, and I hope we'll be able to help you sort out some of your issues, or at least recognize some of your problems. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is bad behavior number one. We're going to go through a little bit of a scenario, a real life scenario from an actual consulting engagement. I've tried to, make it anonymous enough so that I don't embarrass too many people, but here it goes. We're consultants, we're Agile consultants, and we get called a lot, and we hear this kind of thing all the time. So, I mean, over the years, just can't tell you how many times we've talked with customers about their problems, and we hear these sorts of things all the time. Our teams need help. We can't deliver projects. We're terrible at delivery. We need Agile so that we can deliver faster. That's one of my favorites. We can't plan or estimate. We need more training. And so on and so forth. All of these issues, really, and this is a pretty common theme. We hear this a lot, and so this gets us into a discussion with our clients, and the discussions sometimes go like this. Well, here's the manager here. We need more training for our teams and estimation on planning. And I'll say something like, really, why do you say that? What makes you believe that? And our client will say, well, we can't estimate anything. We do it all the time. You'd think we'd be better at it by now, but our estimates are terrible, and our projects are always late. And so there's some interesting word choices there in that sentence. And so I'll say something like, well, what do you mean you estimate all the time? Well, we have new project requests coming in every week. We need to provide quick and accurate estimates so that we can get these projects approved and get started on them ASAP. And there's I hear that all the time, and there's so many problems in that answer. The first is that we're pulling the team off of their work to give estimates all the time. Hey team, can you stop giving me an estimate? Hey guys, I need an estimate. Can you stop what you're doing? I need it right away. And that's happening all the time, he says. The second issue with that statement is that we need to get these projects approved. That the whole point of all this is to get approval for everything. Say yes to everything is basically what his manager's goal is in life, apparently. And then there's a third problem there, is that we need to get started on all of them right away. And so all of these things are major dysfunctions that cause a lot of problems for our delivery teams. And we're going to get into more of that in just a moment. And so, I'll say something like, and like I said, this is an actual conversation. It's kind of amazing. Well, don't you realize that every time you inject a new project into a team that's already busy doing other stuff, or pull them out to do a bunch of unplanned estimation work, you're destroying all the estimates that they gave to you already. They gave you estimates assuming a certain level of capacity or availability or ability to focus, on the given their current situation, and you keep changing the situation. You keep pulling them out, and you keep dumping more stuff on them, and that destroys every estimate that they've given you up to this point. You're the ones who are actually making it impossible for them to estimate accurately. And I remember saying this to a fairly senior manager, and I've just met with stony silence. So I wonder how many of you have similar situations like this going on in your organization. We're going to have some poll questions a little bit later, but think about that. Think about if this is a kind of thing that you see in your organizations very often. So I want to dig a little deeper here. We got Piglet on the couch, and we're going through these questions. It's fascinating to have these conversations with folks. And so I'll say, well, okay, well, are there just a few teams or project managers that are really struggling with this issue, or is it more widespread? And the time and time again, almost every time, the client or the manager person that we're talking to will say, it's all of them. It's a problem across our organization. Aha! This is sort of the aha moment for me when folks say it's a problem across our organization, because that leads me to believe that there's something else going on here, a bigger problem, and it goes like this. The problem isn't the teams, and the problem isn't their ability to estimate, and it's not their ability to deliver. If only a few teams are struggling, then maybe there are particular teams that need more training or more skills, or they need to get better at estimation, or whatever the issue is. But if almost everyone is struggling, then the problem isn't with the teams. The problem is that the system in which they're trying to operate in is broken. That there really isn't an effective work intake process. We have a somewhat weak management that says yes to everybody and to every request. Equating projects to releases, which we'll talk about later. Projectizing everything, which isn't always the answer. And just sort of really lacking in a kind of real management system. We have a set capacity, we have a certain capacity, and not really managing to that. Or setting things up and managing for delivery. Most of the management seems about how do we get more stuff started, and the question isn't how do we get more stuff delivered, which would lead you to a different set of answers and a different management style, and a different set of actions that you would take if you were organizing for delivery instead of organizing just to get more stuff started. Okay. We do see this a lot, and like I said, I'll be asking in a moment whether you feel that you have some of these same issues. All right, so I want to get into some of the tools now that help us start to address some of these problems, dig a little deeper, look a little bit more into how we might attack some of these problems. Okay, the first thing that we have to understand, I think, is, and I think a lot of us in the Agile community know this already, is that all Agile methods gain speed and quality by limiting width. So on the right-hand side, I think a lot of us have probably seen pictures like this. On the right-hand side, I've got a lot of traffic. And because there's a lot of traffic, that traffic is moving really slowly. Things are hardly moving at all. And it's very difficult to estimate when you're going to get home, right? On the other side of the highway, on the left-hand side of the highway, in the upper left corner of this picture, you see cars flying down the highway because there isn't very much traffic. That upper left side, they're able to move faster, and they probably have a more predictable arrival time. And we see this sort of thing. It's everywhere around us. It manifests itself in computer networks. If networks are highly utilized, they're going to be slow. CPUs and computers. If the CPU is pegged at 100%, response time is going to be slow. This sort of thing is everywhere. And Agile tries to deal with this at the team level by limiting WIP in some form or fashion. In the Kanban world, we have explicit WIP limits. We might say, well, we're only going to work on 5 things at once. And by focusing on 5 things at once and only 5 things at once, we can get those done very quickly and have our quality go up as well, because we're able to put our whole minds into solving just a few problems at once. In the Scrum world, we use the time box method of limiting our focus. We're going to only sign up for as many things as we can get all the way to done in a 2-week sprint, say, for example. So both of those are ways of limiting WIP. Kanban's a little more explicit. Scrum's is limits WIP somewhat indirectly, but it does limit WIP. And the same issue goes at the portfolio level. If you've got way too many projects going on at the same time, they're all competing for resources. There's usually a few constraints in the organization that are preventing things from moving forward. People are bouncing back and forth between 42 different things all at the same time. Everyone's very, very busy, but not much is actually getting put into production. The result is usually a whole lot of spending going on and not very much delivery happening. And so one of the key aspects is that portfolios need WIP limits too. Otherwise, you just sort of get this project gridlock of activity and spending with nothing actually flowing through to done. This is a problem that is absolutely inherent. Seems to be almost everywhere that we go. Almost every organization that we deal with has this problem. And I think Agile kind of exacerbates it somewhat. There's an expectation when you go to Agile that we're going to suddenly go faster. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But there are a lot of natural limitations in most organizations to going faster, and they don't have to do with the individual teams themselves and how we do the work within those teams. That have to do with sort of the system that's set up and the system that everyone is trying to operate in starts to become the limiting factor. Back when Scrum and Agile were really first gaining popularity, one of the things that Ken Schwaber used to say was that Scrum wasn't going to solve all of your problems. What it's going to do is throw those problems in your face every day and force you to have to deal with them. And that's exactly what is going on in a lot of organizations. We're not getting the speed and performance that we'd like. Hey, let's bring in Agile so that we can go faster. And you might get a few benefits from that, some benefits from that, but a lot of organizations haven't realized the benefits of going to Agile that they thought they were going to get. Because what it has done is sort of elevated and escalated and made apparent all of the other issues in the organization that are keeping things from flowing through to done. One of which is how we do portfolio management. Now we'll go a little bit more into this. There are other structural issues as well, and I'll briefly highlight some of those at the end. But the portfolio piece is one of those, and we're going to focus a little bit more on that today. All right, the first thing that we need to do oftentimes is to even get a picture of what's going on, to visualize our traffic, if you will, our project traffic. We like to use visual boards to track our projects. In this particular board, each of these little white cards is a distinct project, and they're going through a life cycle of planning. This next column is called delivery, but it's not really delivery. It's sort of elaboration, backlog development, getting the stories, some stories dev ready, some architecture work, and kind of getting things ready for development. The next column is called build, I believe, and that one is where we're actually starting to develop working software and then get it into production. And so each of these white cards represents a little a project that's flowing through its life cycle. And I think a lot of us are used to using this kind of a system for tracking user stories within an Agile project or an Agile team, but it's very instructive to use this at an organizational level to look at the flow of project delivery into production. And in most of the places where I've done this, we'll find hundreds of cards somewhere in the build column and very few in the done column. And that's usually a sign that we've got too much going on. There's some gridlock there. Things are unable to move forward. No one effort is able to get the resources or the decisions that it needs to move forward. and we just kind of have this big mess kind of in the middle. So this is very common. Another good thing to do would be on all of these cards to write the start dates and dates that things move into the next column, so we can kind of get start to graph some cumulative flow, or just to get a picture of how long it takes to do certain projects. We might size these projects up very simply, t-shirt sizes, small, medium, large, extra large, and start to learn, take small projects, whatever it is, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days to go through our organization's process. Takes large projects years. If you see a card that's in the build column for 6 months or 9 months or a year or more, then maybe there are some issues there. But we want to track this flow. We're very visual animals, and a lot of times just doing something simple like this will start to make some of the problems apparent. So I think Stephanie, we had set up a few poll questions beforehand, and so I think it's time for one now. All right, so I'll give everyone a moment or two to think about that. Think about whether you think you've got too many simultaneous efforts going on in your organization, and we'll see what those numbers tell us in a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the presentation, and we'll talk about the results in a moment. Okay, well, we already have some results. Most of us, looks like 65% is what I'm seeing, think that we probably have too much going on at the same time. 35% feel that sometimes we've got too much going on, and no takers for, we never have too much going on. And that's, I think, pretty reflective of what we typically see in most of our client sites. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. And when you have this situation where you think you've got too much going on, the first thing to do is to get some cars off of the highway so that we can get some flow going, start to get some traffic flowing. And we have to start whittling things down somewhat. I was working with a team one time, and I felt that this one team had this problem. And so we just got everyone in a room and asked everyone to write down, well, what are all the things everyone's working on? And this was like a just pretty small team. It was like a 10-person team, but they had 12 simultaneous projects going on at the same time for 10 people, which was beyond ridiculous. And not all the senior manager types were even aware that the team was spending time on all of this stuff. Like some manager would come to this team and say, hey, can you do X for me? And some other manager would come to the team the next day and say, hey, we really need Y. Can you work on Y? I would appreciate it. Thanks. And there's just no coordination going on, and no clear ownership of what the team is working on and what the priorities are. People just keep coming to them and asking them to do stuff, and they keep saying yes, and everyone's working on, 10 people are working on 12 things, and none of it's actually getting done. And none of the managers really know what all the other managers have asked for. So we decided to go through all of these efforts and just kind of score them. We did small, medium, large, very simple kinds of estimates of all these projects, which ones are little tiny things, which ones are medium sized, which ones are big, hairy, ugly things, and then some business value, and also very rough estimate, is this really important to the business and to our customers? It's going to drive some revenue, it's going to save us some costs, or it's going to keep us out of jail, or whatever. It's really, really important. And what are these things that are kind of low value? It's kind of stuff that needs doing, but there's no real urgency around it. It's not the biggest thing in the world. It's kind of a nice to have or something we need to get to one of these days, but it's not the most important thing. And so what we decided to do was to then, and I got the senior manager people in the room, and we decided we're going to focus on high value, small things. What are things that are really impactful? They've got a number of dollar signs associated with them, but they're not real big. And we could just focus, if we could just focus on them, we could knock them out very quickly. And it would be a way that we could start to deliver some value to the organization in short order by, once again, limiting WIP and focusing on those small items that would be the most impactful. And then we'll agree to come back every quarter and go through this process again always focusing on, what can we deliver of value sooner rather than later. So it was a good effort and something I would highly encourage everyone to do if you're feeling like you're having difficulty with priorities and with trying to juggle too much stuff. Once again, this is just another way of making it all visible. I often feel like the management team sometimes don't even know all of the things that their teams are working on. Okay, I'm going to move on then. So how do we get into this situation where I've got this team that's working on all of this stuff at the same time, and they're trying to do this constant juggling? Well, usually it comes from really lacking any kind of an effective work intake process. Various people come to the team, they ask for stuff, and the team just does it. Or in the case of my little story that I told in the beginning about the portfolio manager who was trying to get estimates for all this stuff so they could get it approved and get it started, sometimes the system is kind of set up that way to take on more work. It's sort of its goal in life is to take in more money and start spending it right away sometimes. So, and we'll get to that in a minute. But here's something I've done a couple of times, and it's always been very instructive to do with a client, with the management folks. This little picture, which I don't remember who took this picture, it's a great photo, but we'll get the blue tape out and put this up on the wall, very simple. But the circles represent time. And so the circles in the middle are things that we're either working on right now or about to start working on in very short order. And the further out you go, the further out into the future these efforts or projects or requests are. And so things out near the edge are things that we might need 2 or 3 or 4 quarters from now. Things right in the middle are things that we're working on right now. Each sector, the triangular shaped sections, those sectors are different business areas. One could be, what is all the stuff that HR needs, and that might go in one sector, and what's all the stuff that accounting wants, and that goes in another sector. Or maybe we're a product company, we've got multiple products, and the product manager A wants these things, and this other product needs all this other stuff. And just getting it out there and looking at all the requests that are out there, who wants them, and when do they need them, when do they think they need them, it's all very approximate. Will give us a pretty good picture that, man, there is a big mess coming. I've got all this stuff in the middle that we're working on right now. We may be a ways off from delivering any of it because we're trying to do so many things at once. And if you go out 1 or 2 circles, you can see that there's another 40 things in the queue waiting to come at us. And it's a sort of a diagram that the management folks kind of can look at and say, wow, we had no idea there was all this stuff, or I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad. And it's a way to force the conversation, the very difficult conversation that we know from economics that desires are limitless, and but capabilities and funds and supply is not limitless, and there's always a tension there between what we want and what we're able to have. And we have to get to a point where we can drive these discussions. I know you people want all this stuff, but we don't have the time or the money, the people, the capacity to deliver anywhere near all of this. We have to have some way of figuring out what it is we're going to do. And it's a good tool for driving some hard discussions. And like I said, these are, we are visual creatures, and to the extent you can make these things visible, it becomes very impactful. So how do we choose, though, of all of these things on this board? What do we pick? It could be who yells the loudest. There's allocation schemes. We're going to give 20% of our capacity to this area, and we're going to give 30% of our capacity or budget to that area. And there's those ways of doing it. We're going to do round robin. Hey, we're going to focus on you for a while for this quarter, and the next quarter we'll turn our attention to another business area and focus on them. These are all common ways that I've seen done. Here's another one. It comes from, it's an idea that's been around for a long time. Donald Reinertsen wrote about it years ago in several of his books, even going back to before this one. This was from 2009 on the left here. But the idea is this weighted shortest job first. There's a little bit of a math formula involved. I'm not going to go into it. I would just ask you if you're interested in looking for sort of rational ways to make economic decisions, to look into this. You can find plenty of information out there, either looking up Reinertson's work on the web, or you can go to the Scaled Agile framework, because they are proponents of this system as well. So there's a formula that you use, and it's not too scary. But the whole point of it is that there's a way to make rational economic decisions between different efforts without actually knowing hard values for much of anything. Like, I don't actually have to know how long one project is going to take. I don't actually have to know how much it's going to cost me exactly. I can use point values, and hopefully a lot of us on the call are familiar with Agile, and we understand point systems, point estimation schemes. But we can use point values for all of this stuff. We can use point values for business value. We can use it to estimate the project size, 1 point, 2 points, 5 points, just one's bigger than another. We can use point values to estimate risk, and we can use point values to estimate time criticality. This one we have to have right away. This other one's really important and valuable, but there's no real known hard date when it has to be done by, but sooner the better. And just knowing that kind of stuff, you can make decent rational decisions. And I want to say the math isn't really the important thing, or the formula isn't the important thing. It's getting the senior folks in the room to talk about all of these things and to come to some agreement on what really is time critical, and where do we have luxury to push things out? Where really is the more business value? Why do you think this thing has more business value than that? And driving those kind of discussions is really important. The graphs on the left with the black shading and like I said, I won't go too much into this, but it's possible to sequence your projects exactly wrong. Like, if you chose exactly the wrong sequence, you would have the minimum delivery of value and the maximum cost of delay. And there's a way to sequence projects where I can start to deliver value much earlier and lower the cost of delay. And that's where the weighted shortest job first idea comes from. If you're interested in this kind of thing, or you think that you have a management team that would likes to have a tool for how to think about this, I would encourage you to take a look at this idea, weighted shortest job first. Okay, I'm going to go on. Okay, so that we've talked about a couple of problems. Too many projects going on at the same time with too much traffic. No real efficient work intake process, no rational way of deciding how projects are going to get done, a tendency to just say yes to them all and get them started immediately is what leads to our traffic problem. The next thing I want to talk about is our projects and releases, and how those aren't necessarily the same thing. So down at the bottom in the green box is a conversation that I had with a senior leader at a large organization. And I said, I think you guys should really try. You've got a lot of money and you have a lot of capacity here. You've got armies of people, and yet the delivery seems to take a long time. And I'm wondering, I think we should just try to deliver something every month. And this senior executive said, well, I don't think we can make our projects that small. And it was just a fascinating moment for me. And it's something that I haven't really thought about in years, this idea that a project is a release. Those aren't the same thing. And if your organization thinks about them that way, it's probably going to be very difficult for you to deliver kind of quickly. Large projects are really slow, and they're very resistant to change. They're difficult. They're difficult to change. But a project doesn't have to be a release. I could have a project that may be a large effort, and it may take a year or multiple years to be done with it. But that doesn't mean that I can't deliver every month or every quarter or every day into production. I could potentially build out pieces and parts, features, capabilities, and chunk them up so that I get deliveries much more frequently. we did a bunch of work at Citizenship and Immigration Services as part of the federal government legal immigration program into the United States. And when we first started working there, working with the CIO, Mark Schwartz, who's fantastic, by the way, they had a delivery time for their projects was on average, I think it was around 300 days or so. It was almost a year on average for major programs to deliver into production. They're now down to below 30 days on average, with some teams delivering much more frequently into production. They still have the same funding model. They still have all of the same governance requirements. They have all the documentation and regulatory issues that they have to deal with. You know, the environment that they operate in, the federal government and all of its mandates and bureaucracies hasn't changed. But they've changed how they think about projects and how they organize them and how they chunk them up so that they can go from almost 1 year per delivery down to, like I said, under 30 days now. And looking for pieces of value that can be deployed early and often. Okay. And another benefit of this is that it gives you the ability to redirect teams. A team can deliver something in 30 days or 60 days or whatever it is, 2 weeks, and now they've delivered something, they've made some customers happy, and maybe I can redirect them, and now they can go work on something else and focus on it for a few weeks, deliver something, and now come back. And I get this ability to switch and to interleave, and I get a level of flexibility that we didn't have before, when everyone was all focused on this one giant effort that wasn't going to deliver anything, you know, for years potentially. It's something to think about in how you structure projects in your organization. You know, the pictures on the left at the top, just in terms of mental models. A lot of waterfall projects or even big projects are organized like that boat on top. We're going to put everything on this boat. It's all part of one release, and it's going to take forever to get it all the way across the ocean. But there's other ways of delivering lots of stuff. You know, down on the bottom, I've got planes. They're all lined up, and they're coming in. And maybe you can kind of use that as a bit of mental imagery to help you think about how you can move large. There's different ways of moving large amounts of stuff. Okay, I'm going to move on. One of the interesting ideas that I really like a lot. Well, first of all, I think we've got another poll question here. Stephanie, when you're ready, we could pop that up. And I just wanted you guys to think about how long would it take you in your organization to deliver, you know, a feature that somebody wanted or requested from the very beginning, from the idea that from the moment it's requested to the moment it goes into production. So it's got to get approved, it's got to get funded, it's got to get scoped, it's got to get estimated, it's got, you know, yada, 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 yada.
We'll give you guys a couple more seconds to get those responses in.
Yeah, there probably should be an option here that says more than 90 days.
Oh, yeah. Just a couple more people. Okay, here you go.
Very good. Oh, very good. Okay, very good. Well, we've got some that are down there in the less than 30 days. That's fantastic. Really, really nice. Good to see that sort of thing. Actually, these all numbers are pretty decent compared to a lot of organizations. Maybe a third or so would be more than 90 days, but split across pretty well. So that's all not too bad. Not too bad. I think we're always looking for faster ways to deliver, and so we're going to continue to explore some of these topics. But very, very good. Thank you for that. Okay, one of the ideas that I like, I've worked with a couple of clients now, is to get to this notion of a fixed cadence of delivery. The idea here is that we fix the delivery date and we flex the scope. And so these two examples are from enormous large organizations. I don't want you to think that this kind of thing can only be done by, you know, tiny little startups. The one on the left is from a major Fortune 500 company that everyone would recognize, Fortune 100 perhaps. The one on the right comes from a large government agency. But the idea in both of them is that in both of these cases, they're delivering to production every month, and they're flexing the scope. Whatever's done and ready and tested and approved gets put into the deployment, and what stuff that isn't ready and fully tested and approved would just float into the next month. But we always hit our dates. We put something into production. We're always delivering value. And one of the nice things about this, it's very easy to coordinate. The production people know exactly when it's going in. It goes in, whatever, it's every other Thursday, or every fourth Thursday at 7 p.m. or something. They can schedule it down to the hour. And there's not a lot of swirl and craziness and zaniness around a production delivery. It's becoming an operational thing. We do it all the time. Right? The help desk people know when it's going to happen. The production support people know when it's going to happen. The application owners know when it's going to happen. The developers know when it's going to happen. Everyone knows, and it's sort of almost a non-event. I really like this way of operating. You're able to get the entire organization on board to support frequent delivery. When you have the scope-bound deliveries, there's always this, we're working up to the last moment and no one knows exactly when it's going to be done and when all the tests are going to pass, and there's always these delays. And then finally at 2 o'clock in the morning, someone says, hey, it works, it's done, let's push it. And now there's all this crazy swirling about of getting everyone together and getting something into production and just all of it, always like constant sort of firefighting, if you will. And if you can get to working this kind of way, with the dates are set and we're going to deliver something. It may only be one bug fix, maybe it's two, a small feature, but we're always delivering something, and it happens on exactly the same day, exactly the same time, every week, every month, whatever it is. I remember working with a group at a major financial services client of ours, and they did all the they had a weekly drop. It was every Friday evening for maintenance and bug fixes, and it just happened at the same time every week, and it's all very, very manageable to work that way. Okay, going to move on. All right, there's another way to think about this too, and it's something called the no projects movement. This is gaining some traction of just questioning whether everything even needs to be a project or not, and when is it appropriate to use up the project mentality to manage delivery, and when might it not be. So in that last example, I showed a case where delivery was somewhat operationalized. It happened every month, right, on the same day at the same time. Now we know from probably the first paragraph of the PMBOK that projects are, by definition, sort of one-time events. So if we deliver into production every month, is it a project? It's a very interesting. It's an interesting idea. I think there's been a tendency over the years to try to projectize everything, and there are times when it makes sense to do all that. But we don't do tons of documentation and artifacts and whatnot for the monthly payroll run or the monthly accounts payable run. And both of those probably have more money and risk at stake in them than any particular one software development project we've got going on in our organization. But they don't set projects up around those. So why do we need to set projects up around all of the IT efforts? So it's an interesting thing to think about. And we've got, once again, I don't want you to think that this is something that's only going on in little startups. This is another picture on the left, a Fortune 500 company that we've been working with. Each of the rows in that on that big board is a sort of a different business area, if you will. And now, instead of tracking projects, these green cards aren't projects, they're features. And we just have a continuous flow of features coming out of the business and working their way across, heading towards delivery. There's no project boundaries there. There isn't necessarily a set project scope. Each of these business areas has a budget for the year, and they promise to the business to deliver certain capabilities or certain functionality or solve certain business problems. um, but it's not highly detailed line by line scope requirements that are developed. We need to deliver these capabilities, and it's up to us as a business and IT working together to sequence them appropriately, see what we can to deliver into production. There's a couple of ways. If you took one of these rows, you could take all of those features and put them into something called a project and plan it all out and estimate it all out and do it in a kind of waterfall-y way or one big giant release, for example. And that would be one way of delivering it. Another way of delivering it is there is no project. There isn't necessarily a set date or a set time. We're going to take these features and run them through one at a time or a few at a time and just deliver into production constantly. You know, maybe every week, maybe it's every Friday night, or maybe it's once a month or whatever it is. And it's just a normal course. Delivery is a normal course of operations, and we don't need to projectize it. And I wonder how much time and effort and money you could save by not having to do all of the project overhead documentation and meetings and all that kind of stuff. And you could just focus on delivery and on quality instead of on paperwork. There are certainly times where it makes sense to utilize projects and projectization. There are cases where it makes sense. But more and more, I think we're seeing organizations trying to have delivery become more of an operational thing as opposed to a one-time event. Okay, gonna move on. Okay, I want to talk about another bad behavior. So we've talked about a few things so far. Management saying yes to everything, not having any kind of rational way of sequencing or organizing our projects, or projectizing things that don't need to be projectized, not setting things up so that delivery is operational, having delivery set up to be a one-time event, et cetera, et cetera. I want to talk about another one here in just a moment. This is also from a real live client situation as well. Okay, so this is me talking to a senior business vice president type person, pretty important person. So, how was the portfolio planning meeting today? Well, yeah, it was okay, I guess. I mean, we thought about priorities and all of our competing needs and whatnot, and we came to some agreements, and we made a few new commitments. You know, we didn't say yes to everything, but we did agree to start up a few new things. And I said, well, that sounds great. I mean, that's what we want. We want you guys to get everything out on the table and debate the priorities and the competing needs and agree on, you know, a short list of things that we're going to focus on. So why do you think that's just okay? You kind of sound a little down about it. And the business VP says, well, because after the meeting, I saw several people pull the CTO aside for some private conversations. Well, why is that a problem? What's the big deal with that? I know, and she says, I know what they're doing. They're asking the CTO to do a bunch of stuff for them on the side that we in the portfolio group didn't approve. And he's weak, and he's going to say yes to everybody, just like he always does. And so I know already that the commitments that they just made to me not a few hours ago are already screwed. He's giving away the capacity that was promised to my area. You see this a lot as well. A lot of hallway deals being made, not bringing the work to the table, getting it all out there for everyone to see, not having a process by which work gets approved be fully visible and fully transparent, and people kind of working around the process. It's a big problem. I see it in a lot of places, and I wonder, you know, if you have any of that sort of behavior going on in your organizations as well. Okay, so what we're really talking about here is sort of a different sort of a model for project portfolio management, especially in the agile space. And it really is the way I've seen it often worked in a lot of organizations is the PMO is either has a financial focus, how do we get money and get that money spent appropriately, and they're really focused on the dollars. Or it's about an approval process, really. How do I get, it's sort of a gateway to get work going, and so the idea is how do I get stuff estimated and approved and just work it through the process so that we can get started on it. And those are fine. They cannot, both of those focal points for the PMO often lead to the traffic problem. And they often lead, in my experience anyway, to a lot of spending and sometimes not a lot of delivery. So this model that we're talking about for the portfolio management is really being the traffic cop to prevent project traffic jams by purposely not having too many simultaneous projects and demanding that big projects be chunked up to deliver value more frequently. Like the PMO doesn't approve a project if it doesn't deliver something back to the organization early and often. Trying to work with all of the teams and the rest of the organization to make delivery a regular and repeatable and operational way of working. Delivery shouldn't be a rarity. It should be something that we're doing all the time. And creating this rational work intake and governance process in order to keep the traffic down. And trying to enforce all of the above, which is always difficult, so that we can get this continuous flow of delivery, which I think that, you know, it was the reason we all went down the Agile path in the first place, I believe, oftentimes. I think Agile is often seen as a way to get some bolt-on performance, if you will. I've got this organization, we're not necessarily delivering as well as we'd like. Let's bolt Agile on and see if we can go faster. And you can get some benefits. You can get some benefits from that. But oftentimes, what it will uncover are a lot of other limitations. How the team gets work done is certainly a big factor in an overall organization performance, but it's only one factor of many. And so, oftentimes, moving to Agile organizations will start to see lots of other limitations. We've been talking about one today. And that is the PMO and what the PMO's purpose in life is and how it's organized and how it does its work as one potential limitation. Org structures is another one. Everyone's grouped into functional silos and hierarchies and departments and specialties. And in order to get something into production, you've got to go through 25 different groups in order to get something done. The annual funding cycle is another. We see a lot of organizations that want to see all the detailed requirements way up front so that they can get it approved at the end of the year for next year's delivery. And I guess I want to be very clear about one thing. Even if your teams are doing Agile, there's nothing at all Agile about having someone make a request this year that gets estimated this year and put into a budget for next year, that at the end of the year it gets approved, and the year after that we actually start working on it, and then we start the Agile process. If it's 2.5 years later after someone asks for something, there's nothing Agile about that, right? The way contracts are set up with some of our suppliers and vendors often are a challenge. The business requirement side is often a challenge, and the list just goes on and on and on. So I would ask you to, if you're looking for your next level of performance, to consider looking more broadly. There's a lot of focus on the teams, which is fine, and we can certainly look at teams and how they get work done, but they're often trying to work in an environment that is just not set up for them to deliver quickly. And so we've got another final poll question here at the bottom. How well do you think your organization is designed for frequent delivery? Are you organized well for frequent delivery, do you think?
We need just a couple more seconds to get those responses in. All right, here you go.
Very good. So great to see that some of us feel that we are well organized for delivery. Consider yourselves very lucky. And hats off to you and your organizations for being able to get you to that place. It's good. The vast majority of us often feel that we are not very well organized for frequent delivery. And it's very, don't feel too badly about that. It is extremely, extremely common. as I said, to just sort of take this agile thing and bolt it on to your existing systems, expecting some gains. Like I said, you will probably get some gains, but there's often a long way to go, and that's perfectly normal part of the growing process for organizations taking on agile. Okay, go to the next slide. I think it's the last one. This is the shameless pitch part. And this is what we do. We work with a lot of large organizations. You can see on the right there on a lot of these issues: scaling approaches, organizational structures, the business side agility, helping PMOs get set up, the DevOps training programs, and general change management. So as I said, all of these things play a factor in your organization's ability to deliver. The agile work on the teams is a part of it, and it's a big part of it, but it's only a piece. And I think that is it for slides for today, and I believe we have, as planned, a few minutes left to take a couple of questions.
Yeah, we certainly do. So go ahead and submit those questions if you haven't already. And Roland, I've got a couple here for you.
Okay.
The first one is, how do you get senior management to get on board with some of these decisions?
I think it's a good question. The first thing is getting them to realize that they have a problem. And I think most of them realize that they do have a problem. If you're doing Agile at all, it's probably because somebody wanted us to go faster. And at some level, we have to have a discussion with them to say, hey, we did this Agile thing because we wanted to deliver better, we wanted to deliver faster, we wanted to deliver more frequently, and we've gotten some benefits from that. But are we getting the benefits that we had hoped to get? And if not, why not? That would be the one potential conversation. Another conversation is we need to always be improving. You're never done getting better. Your organization has to always be growing, always be reflecting on its performance and figuring out what's next. And so another message would be, what is next? We've done the Agile thing on our teams. It's going okay. What are we going to tackle next? And this can be an option for that. I've seen some teams do this a little bit more covertly and just put all this stuff on the wall, like a big giant thing on the wall of here's all the stuff that we're working on, so that everyone can see it. And now the managers kind of walk by and they say, what is this? This is all the stuff that we're working on at the same time right now. And sometimes that alone can get people to see the extent of the problem. And so I think you have to know the culture of your organization a little bit, kind of what makes them tick, what it is they're after, and show them how some of these things can help them get what they're after. That maybe by doing some of this stuff, we can get to where they want to be, which is to be delivering more frequently and with higher quality and with more predictability.
Great, thanks. Another incoming question. Any thoughts on impact mapping?
Yeah, I love impact mapping. We like it as a tool. I think if you can get once again, it's kind of related to that last question, if you can get the right people in the room to talk about impact mapping, what it is that we're seeing, how is that impacting different parts of the business, or our stakeholders or our teams, etc., and then start to dive down, through that tree of questions. That can certainly be a great tool for facilitating this discussion and for helping to show why these things are important and how they're manifesting themselves in terms of our organizational performance. Yeah, impact mapping is some great stuff. And for folks on the call who are not aware of impact mapping, I would suggest that you just go to and look it up on the web. It's an interesting and tool that's definitely gaining in popularity.
Definitely, yeah. All right, next question. We're not allowed to use information radiators, old school federal government.
Yeah.
we just can't put artifacts on a wall. So what are your suggested agile and lean tools?
Okay, yeah, that's great. I've worked with a couple of government groups who, first of all, that's an interesting thing because I do a lot of work with the federal government, and there are many branches and agencies that have stuff all over the walls. But I understand if you're in a more secure area or risk-averse area, they may not want to do that. I've worked with a couple of clients that have purchased large screen, kind of huge monitors, and we have those on the wall, and so we're able to turn them off at night when everyone leaves, so no one can see. But people can still, as they're walking down the halls, can see these things. To the extent, and I know it's difficult, to the extent that you can make it visible, at least temporarily, is really powerful. Tools are great, and we use the usual kinds of tools with most of our organizations. Version 1, Lean Kit, those are two very popular ones. Rally is another. There's a plethora of tools out there. The trick is of course getting people to actually look at them, and so just because you have the tool doesn't mean that any of these senior managers are actually going to open it up and look at it, and that's where the challenge is. You could potentially capture these things in tools and print that out on big paper, and bring it to meetings and show it that way. But having the big monitors on the wall, if that is an option that you could turn off in the evening, might be a way to go.